I used to think I'd heard every sound a heart could make, laughter, grief, even the quiet sigh of loneliness, but I'd never heard betrayal, not until that morning. It was a crisp October day in Seattle. The air was cool enough to sting the lungs, the kind of morning that made you grateful to still be alive. I was sitting by the window of my office at Walker & Sons Engineering, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug I'd owned since 1984. The same year I built this company with my bare hands. That's when the phone rang. At first, I didn't answer. It was a video meeting notification from my son, Daniel. He was 39, confident, successful, the kind of man people naturally follow. I clicked on it absent-mindedly, expecting another routine report. But what came through the speaker wasn't meant for my ears. "Dad's a good man," Daniel was saying, his voice firm, businesslike. "But he's old-fashioned. If we don't push him out now, investors will lose faith." There was a pause. Then another voice, cool, deliberate, with that familiar sharpness I once mistook for charm. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. "It's time, honey," she said softly. "Your father built a great company, but it's his time to rest. We can't let nostalgia ruin the future." My hand froze halfway to the mug. I stared out the window at the falling leaves, golden, quiet, dying beautifully. Was that what I was now? A leaf that had served its purpose? Daniel's tone hardened. "I'll make it sound gentle. Say it's about his health, his well-being. He'll sign. He always trusts me." That one broke me. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I just sat there, listening to the sound of my own breathing, the hum of the air conditioner, the tick of the clock. It felt like sitting in the ruins of a life you thought was still standing. When the call ended, I realized my coffee had gone cold. I poured it out and just watched it swirl down the sink, dark, bitter, and gone. On the office wall hung an old photo, me holding a baby boy in front of a rusty workshop, both of us grinning from ear to ear. That boy had grown up to be my pride, and now, my undoing. I whispered to myself, "Helen, you were right. We gave him everything, except our time." That night, I drove down to the old workshop by the harbor, the one Helen and I built before success ever came knocking. Dust floated in the beams of my flashlight. The smell of sawdust and oil still clung to the air, as if time itself refused to move on. I ran my fingers across the wooden bench, the one I'd carved her initials into the day she told me she was pregnant. And in that stillness, I heard her voice again, as clearly as if she were standing right beside me. "Thomas, don't let anger teach the lesson. Let truth do it." I looked around the room, the place where my dream began, and I knew she was right. If my own son wanted to bury my legacy, I would teach him something that no business school ever could. What it really means to build something with your hands and your heart. The next morning, I called Evelyn Parker, my attorney for 25 years. I trusted her more than I trusted most of my family. When I told her what had happened, she leaned back and said calmly, "Thomas, if they're planning to prove you unfit, that means you still hold the power they want. Don't let them corner you. Choose your own ending." And that's when it began. The quiet plan that would shake the foundations of everything Daniel believed he controlled. For weeks, I said nothing. I attended meetings, signed papers, smiled politely. I watched, listened, waited. And then one afternoon, Daniel called. "Dad, let's have dinner tomorrow night," he said warmly. "There's big news about the company's future. You'll love it." I smiled to myself, the kind of smile only a tired man can wear. "Sure, son," I said softly. "Let's make it a night to remember." That evening, as I sealed a white envelope and placed it inside my jacket, I caught my reflection in the mirror. A 68-year-old man, yes, but not a broken one. A man who had built an empire once, and who was about to teach his son what it means to truly own something. The storm hadn't even started yet, but I was ready. I've lived long enough to know this. The worst storms don't arrive with thunder. They slip in quietly with soft music, polished silverware, and a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The restaurant was warm, the kind of place where older couples share soup and stories. A Sinatra song hummed in the background. Candlelight turned every glass into a star. I asked for a corner table facing the door. Old habit, old wars. Daniel arrived right on time. Crisp suit, perfect tie. Vanessa floated beside him like a winter perfume. Cool, expensive, and meant to linger. They sat. We exchanged pleasantries. Weather, traffic, a Seahawks game I hadn't watched. The server poured water. The ice cracked. "Dad," Daniel began, easy and practiced, "we've been talking with the board. Everyone agrees. It's time to help you step back. For your health." He smiled the way men do when they've rehearsed compassion in the mirror. Vanessa rested her hand on his sleeve. "We know how much this company means to you. We want to honor your legacy while letting it grow beyond you." Her voice was soft. Her eyes were steel. I let a few seconds hang in the air, like a carpenter testing a beam. "Before we discuss the future," I said, "I'd like you to look at something." I placed a plain white envelope on the table and slid it toward my son. His fingers hesitated, then tore the seal. He scanned the first document, then the next. His jaw slackened. Vanessa leaned in, eyes narrowing, lips tightening. Inside the envelope were 3 things. First, a notarized letter from Evelyn's office establishing a Walker family trust, temporarily holding my 80% stake. No shares could be reassigned, pledged, or voted without my written consent. Not today, not ever, unless I said so. Second, a certified independent capacity evaluation from a neurologist I'd met the week before. The report was short, clinical, undeniable. Mr. Thomas Walker demonstrates intact judgment and decision-making capacity. The paper might as well have been a lightning rod. The unfit rumor died right there, without dignity or ceremony. Third, a copy of a 1999 IP retention clause, signed by me and the original partners, recognizing all foundation designs and early patents as my personal intellectual property. Licensed to the company, yes, but revocable upon breach of fiduciary duty or material attempt to circumvent the founder's consent. Daniel read that last part twice, then a third time. The Sinatra song carried a single trumpet line across his silence. He looked up. "Dad, where did you even—" "Right where I left it," I said, "in the first drawer I ever bought for this business. The wooden one with the stuck handle." Vanessa shifted, the candle throwing a thin, wavering light across her cheekbone. This is dramatic, Thomas, but it doesn't change the math. The market wants younger leadership. The board wants continuity. So do our investors. Our employees, I said quietly, want paychecks on time, safe machines, and a reason to be proud to come back tomorrow. I held her gaze until she looked away. The server arrived with bread. We thanked him in 3 different tones. Mine simple, Daniel's distracted, Vanessa's too bright. I broke a piece and didn't eat it. Daniel tried again, softer. "Dad, listen. We're not your enemies. I'm not your enemy." "You're my son," I said. "That's more complicated than enemy or friend." He swallowed. "Then believe me when I say, this transition is what's best." "For whom?" I asked. "For the boardroom? Or for the shop floor?" "Both," Vanessa chimed in. "The world changed, Thomas. We can't let nostalgia slow us down." I let the word sit there, nostalgia, like a stranger pretending it knew our family. I folded my hands. "Here's what will happen," I said. "For the next 2 weeks, nothing changes. No memos, no press. No sudden resignations, no backroom meetings, and no more conversations about my health unless my doctor is in the room." I nodded toward the envelope. "You'll find a temporary injunction drafted, ready to file, if any of those lines are crossed." Vanessa leaned back, the chair creaking. "You're going to war with your own son?" I shook my head. I'm ending one before it begins." She laughed once, small, disbelieving. "This is performative. Investors won't hold for a founder's feelings. They care about growth." "I care about soul," I said, and for the first time that night, my voice sharpened. I built this place with a woman who believed the purpose of work was bigger than profit. I won't sign away the parts of the company that still remember her name. Daniel stared at the tablecloth. The light made a quiet halo around his hands. He was still my boy somewhere under all that polish. I softened. "Son, when your mother got sick, I missed dinners, games, so many ordinary moments. I told myself I'd make it up to you later. There's no later. There's only how we love people while we have them. If power teaches you anything, it should teach you that." He looked up, eyes wet, then blinked it away with a practiced inhale. "Dad, I'm trying to lead." "Then lead with a conscience," I said, "or you'll lead your life into a room you don't recognize." Silence, except for Sinatra walking a melody down the stairs. The server returned. We ordered without tasting the menu. When he left, Vanessa spoke first, brisk and bright. "All right, 2 weeks, then we revisit. We'll bring a retirement package worthy of your legacy, an honorary founder title, a speech, an event." "No pageantry," I said. "If I ever step back, it won't be because I was flattered into it." She held my gaze, then looked at Daniel, a flicker of frustration passing between them like a note under the table. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "Call when you leave. Grace is confirmed for tomorrow morning. Quiet entrance, quiet exit." I set the phone face down. Daniel leaned forward. "What's next then? You hold the shares hostage? You cancel my projects? You freeze hiring?" "No," I said. "Tomorrow I meet someone who still remembers why companies exist." He frowned. "Who?" "Someone who didn't forget that workers have names." He sat back, the meaning skimming across his expression without landing. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. We ate in small bites. I could feel the night holding its breath. When the check arrived, I reached first. Daniel put a hand out, stopped halfway, then pulled it back. The gesture said more than the whole evening. At the door, the chill air sharpened every scent. The bread, the wax, the faint trace of rain coming in off the sound. I put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. He didn't pull away. 2 weeks, I said. No tricks. He nodded, jaw tight. 2 weeks. Vanessa offered a parting smile that didn't melt the frost behind it. "Good night, Thomas." "Good night," I said, and meant it. Outside, the city moved at an old man's pace, slow, deliberate, honest. I stood beneath the awning and watched their taillights fade into the wet, red line of traffic. For a moment I felt the ache, the kind that settles behind the ribs where memory lives. Then the ache lifted, like a small bird startled from a branch. I walked to my truck, the same one I'd kept since the housing boom. On the passenger seat sat a folder I hadn't shown them, a letter of intent laying out a framework I believed in. Fair wages tied to profits, apprenticeships named for Helen, safety upgrades before bonuses, and a promise that the first layoff in any downturn would be executive perks. It wasn't revenge, it was a return to first principles. When I got home, the lake was dark glass. I brewed chamomile, not coffee, and sat in Helen's chair by the window. I spoke to the room the way older men do when no one's around to think it strange. "You told me not to let anger lead," I whispered. "So I won't. Truth will." I set the clock, turned off the lamp, and let the house settle around me. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and then remembered the hour. I slept like a man who had chosen his ground. Morning rose blue and steady. I put on a clean flannel, a jacket Helen liked because it made me look honest, and drove into the city before traffic found its teeth. At the side entrance of our headquarters, Evelyn was waiting with a woman in a charcoal coat and walking shoes. "Mr. Walker," the woman said, extending a hand that was warm despite the chill. "I'm Grace Chen." Her grip had the kind of certainty I recognized, the certainty of people who've done real work. We walked the shop floor while the building was still waking up, motors warming, lights clicking on, that sweet particular smell of metal and oil drifting like a familiar hymn. I introduced her to the foreman, to the machinists whose names I'd never forgotten, to the break room where I'd taped up photos of employees' kids for 30 years. "This is what I want to protect," I said. Grace listened more than she spoke. She asked about injury rates, training budgets, who signed off on safety checks. She ran a hand along the guard of a lathe the way a farmer runs a hand along new fence, respectfully. Back in the conference room, she set her bag down, folded her coat over the chair, and met my eyes. "I've read your proposal," she said. "Most founders want to sell for price. You wrote for purpose. If we do this, we'll do it your way." I nodded once. "My way is people first." She smiled. "That's the only way that lasts." We didn't shake on it then. We didn't need to. Some commitments prefer the quiet. As Grace left by the same side door, the first shift was filing in. Men and women I'd watched grow gray at the temples. A few stopped, surprised to see me that early, then lifted a hand the way mill workers have always greeted the day, with a nod, a grin, a morning, Tom. I stood there and took it in, the ordinary holiness of honest work beginning, and I knew the next move would break something open, maybe Daniel's certainty, maybe the future that had been choking on its own polish. 2 weeks, no tricks, a promise is a promise. Outside, the clouds over Seattle thinned, just enough to let a little light through, not a blaze, not yet, but the kind of light older eyes trust, soft, true, enough to start again. Morning came wrapped in fog, the kind that drapes over Seattle like a confession, soft and gray, hiding everything until you step close enough to see the truth. I parked by the loading dock, my spot for 40 years, and sat for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the city waking up. Today wasn't a work day. Today was the day everything I had built would change forever. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of oil, steel, and coffee. Familiar, honest, the kind of scent that never lies. I walked the length of the corridor slowly, touching the old brick walls as if they could still remember the laughter that once filled them. In the main office, the new sign gleamed, Walker and Sons, innovating tomorrow. I smiled sadly. Tomorrow had come too fast, and not everyone survived the pace. At 9 sharp, Daniel and Vanessa arrived. They looked perfect as always. Tailored clothes, smiles polished for the boardroom, not the soul. "Morning, Dad," Daniel said with that calm corporate voice. "We're ready for the board meeting. Big changes today." "Yes," I said evenly. "I imagine so." They didn't notice the second coffee cup on my desk, the one placed next to mine, or the folder resting beneath it, sealed and waiting. "Dad, you don't need to attend today's vote," Vanessa said. "It's procedural. The transition plan's ready. You'll always be honored as the founder. We've even commissioned a plaque." A plaque. 40 years of sweat, trade shows, sleepless nights, boiled down to a piece of engraved brass. I didn't answer. I simply slid a document across the desk. "Before you start the meeting, you'll want to read this." Daniel frowned. "What is it?" "The future," I said quietly. "One you didn't see coming." He unfolded the paper, and for a brief, beautiful moment, silence filled the room. Then his voice cracked. "You sold it?" I nodded. "Every share, every patent, every license. As of this morning, Walker & Sons belongs to Aurora Engineering Group. Grace Chen is the new owner." Vanessa blinked. You can't do that. This is a family business." "Was," I corrected. "It was a family business until you turned it into a battlefield." Daniel's eyes darkened. "You sold our legacy?" I stood slowly, leaning on the desk. "No, son. I saved it. From greed, from vanity, from dying under the weight of ambition. You wanted control, not purpose. But this company was never about control. It was about people." The door opened quietly behind us. Grace entered, composed, polite, her presence calm as a steady tide. Evelyn followed, briefcase in hand. "Mr. Walker," Grace said warmly, "I just wanted to congratulate you. The transfer is complete." Her tone was respectful, final. Daniel turned pale. You bought us out?" "Yes," she replied simply, "and we'll continue your father's work, but this time with the integrity he intended." Vanessa rose from her chair, anger flickering in her eyes. "This is absurd. You can't just erase us." Grace's calm never wavered. "No one's erasing you. You're free to stay under new management or to leave and start something of your own." Daniel's voice broke. "I spent my life building this with you, Dad. You taught me to fight for what I deserve. And I also taught you," I said softly, "that how you fight matters more than what you win." He clenched his fists. "You destroyed everything out of pride." I shook my head. "No, out of peace." Vanessa muttered under her breath, "You're just an old man who can't let go." I turned toward her, my voice low and steady. "You're wrong. Letting go was the hardest thing I've ever done. But sometimes you have to let go, not because you're weak, but because you finally remember your worth." Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the bay. The first rain of the day began to tap against the window, a slow, rhythmic sound like time marking an ending. I picked up a small photograph from the desk and placed it in front of Daniel. It was us, 35 years ago, standing in front of the first shop. My hair dark, his face still round from childhood, Helen's smile lighting the frame. "I built this for you," I said, "but somewhere along the way, we both forgot what for you meant. It wasn't meant to be your throne, Daniel. It was supposed to be your foundation." He didn't reply. His jaw trembled. He looked at the picture for a long time, then turned it face down. Grace glanced at me. "Shall I gather the staff?" I nodded. It's time they heard it from me. Within minutes, the main floor filled with the people who had kept this place alive. The machinists, the engineers, the secretaries, the janitors. Faces lined with years of work and loyalty. I stood on the small wooden platform that once served as our first stage for announcements. "My friends," I began, my voice steady but thick, 40 years ago, I started this company with $50 and a borrowed saw. I wanted to build something that would outlive me. And it has. But it will only stay alive if it keeps its soul, and that's something no contract can buy. They watched me, quiet, uncertain. Today, I sold Walker & Sons to Aurora Engineering. You'll still have your jobs, your teams, your paychecks, but you'll also have something more important, leaders who value what you do. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone asked, "So you're retiring, Mr. Walker?" I smiled. "I'm resting, not retiring. There's a difference. Retiring means you stop living for what you love. Resting means you start living again." Applause rose softly, hesitant at first, then growing. A few workers wiped tears. One old mechanic, Joe, came forward and shook my hand. "You kept your word, boss," he said. "You never sold us out." I squeezed his hand. "No, Joe. You all were the reason I never could." When the crowd dispersed, Daniel was gone. Only Vanessa lingered by the hallway, arms crossed, face pale. "You really think this makes you noble?" she said bitterly. "You've doomed your son." I sighed. "No, Vanessa. I freed him. Sometimes, the best way to save someone is to let them fall far enough to find the ground again." I left her standing there, her reflection fractured in the glass door. Outside, the rain had turned steady, Seattle's soft symphony of renewal. I stepped into it without an umbrella. The drops felt cool on my skin, like absolution. That evening, back home by the lake, I brewed coffee and watched the storm fade into silver mist. The house felt too quiet, until my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart tremble. Sarah, my granddaughter. "Grandpa." Her voice was small, worried. Dad's been pacing all day. Mom's yelling. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart, I said gently. Just tired. You sound sad. Maybe a little. But sometimes sadness is just peace wearing a disguise. There was a pause. Dad said you ruined everything. I smiled faintly. Then I guess he finally learned how it feels to start from nothing. I don't believe him, she whispered. You're the only one who ever listens to me. You never yell. You just understand. Her words cracked something open in me. I closed my eyes, feeling the ache soften. Sarah, promise me something. When you grow up, don't measure people by what they own. Measure them by what they keep safe. Their kindness, their word, their love. She sniffled. I promise. When we hung up, I sat there for a long while, the phone still warm in my hand. The rain had stopped. The lake shimmered with a pale reflection of the moon. I whispered to the empty room, Helen, it's done. The wind brushed the curtain softly, like a familiar hand on my shoulder, and though I'd lost everything that could be measured for the first time in decades, I felt whole. Morning sunlight spilled across the lake like melted gold. It had been 3 weeks since I'd walked out of the company for the last time, and yet I still woke up before dawn, an old habit that refused to die. I sat on the porch of my new home, a small white house tucked beneath a line of cedar trees on the outskirts of Seattle. The air smelled of pine and fresh rain. For the first time in decades, there was no alarm clock, no meetings, no shareholders waiting for my signature, just silence and peace. People had always told me retirement would feel empty, but for me it felt like breathing again after years underwater. I made 2 cups of coffee, the way I always did. One for me, one for Helen. Her photograph sat on the small wooden table, framed by the morning light. I could almost hear her laugh as the steam curled upward. You see, Helen? I whispered. I kept my promise. The company still stands, but this time it has a soul. The phone buzzed softly. Grace Chen. I answered. Good morning, Mr. Walker. I wanted to let you know the transition is complete. We've renamed the scholarship fund, the Helen Walker Apprenticeship Program. Every year we'll train underprivileged youth in engineering. Your wife's name will live in every project. I closed my eyes. Thank you, Grace. She'd have liked that. She would have been proud, Grace said warmly, and so should you. When the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time, staring at the shimmering lake. For the first time, I didn't feel like a man who'd lost something. I felt like someone who'd returned to himself, to purpose, to the simple things that mattered. Later that afternoon, a car pulled into the driveway. I recognized it instantly, the black sedan I'd given Daniel for his 40th birthday. The sight of it stirred something between nostalgia and ache. The engine cut off, and a long silence followed. Then the door opened. Daniel stepped out slowly, no suit this time. Just a flannel shirt, jeans, and eyes that carried more humility than I'd ever seen in him. He walked halfway up the porch, stopped, and looked down. You really like this place, huh? I smiled faintly. It's quiet. I think the lake forgives people faster than the world does. He gave a small laugh, though it didn't reach his eyes. I came to apologize. You already did, I said gently. You just hadn't said the words yet. He sat down across from me, his shoulders heavy. I was wrong, Dad, about everything. I thought running a company meant proving myself. I wanted to make it bigger, better, but I forgot why you built it in the first place. I took a slow sip of coffee. Son, I spent years thinking success meant building something that would last forever. But even steel rusts if you stop caring for it. What matters is how you build it and who you build it for. He nodded, his voice breaking. I hurt you. I hurt Mom's memory. I shook my head. You lost your way. That's different. The important thing is you found your way back. For a while, we sat without speaking. The wind rustled through the cedars. Somewhere, a heron cried out over the water. Grace told me about the scholarship, he said quietly. I'd like to contribute. Maybe teach a class or two. Good, I said. Teach them what your mother always believed, that real craftsmanship starts in the heart. Daniel looked at me then, eyes glistening. You really forgave me. I smiled softly. Forgiveness isn't something you give once. It's something you choose every day. I still have to remind myself to forgive the part of me that raised you to chase numbers instead of meaning. He nodded, tears threatening to fall. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a CEO. He just looked like my son again. We heard a car door slam and a small voice called out from the driveway. Grandpa! Sarah came running up the steps, her hair bouncing, her smile wide enough to melt any lingering regret. She threw her arms around me. I told Dad we should come visit. I laughed, hugging her tight. You always did know what's right before anyone else. She looked around the porch. It's beautiful here, Grandpa. Can I stay for the weekend? Stay as long as you want, I said. There's plenty of room for laughter here. She grinned, running off to chase a butterfly near the lemon tree. Daniel watched her, his eyes softening. She's a good kid. She's hope, I said quietly. The kind your mother always believed in. We spent the afternoon fixing the old porch railings and talking about things we'd never talked about before. Fishing, music, the little stories Helen used to tell. With every nail hammered and every laugh shared, the distance between father and son seemed to fade. When the sun began to set, we stood by the lake. The sky blazed orange and pink, the water catching every color like stained glass. Daniel turned to me. You know, Dad, I used to think you sold the company out of anger. And now? I asked. He smiled faintly. Now I think you sold it to save me. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He already knew. We stood there as the last light dipped behind the hills, and for once the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was full of forgiveness, understanding, and the kind of love that doesn't need words anymore. Later that night, after they left, I sat back on the porch with a blanket over my knees and a journal in my lap. I opened to a fresh page and began to write. Tonight, I watched my son find his way home. It took a lifetime, but some journeys are worth the years it takes to arrive. I once believed I had to build something that would stand forever. But maybe the greatest legacy isn't what we build, it's who we heal. The moon rose high, gentle and white, glimmering on the lake's surface. The night air carried the scent of cedar and coffee, the soft hum of crickets. I leaned back in Helen's chair and whispered, You see, Helen? He came back, just like you said he would. And in that quiet, I could swear I heard her voice in the wind, soft as ever. You did good, Thomas. You finally learned to live. The breeze stirred the trees, and for a brief moment the whole world seemed to breathe with me. I closed my eyes and smiled, not as a man who had lost everything, but as one who had finally gained peace. And that's how it ended, not with thunder, but with light. Sometimes we spend our whole lives building walls to protect what we love, only to learn that peace comes when we finally open the door. Success fades, money disappears, but love outlasts everything. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Tell someone you love them today, because the most beautiful part of life is the chance to begin again.